heretics, there were Jews as well. So we had Normans, Jews.
But Jews were also expelled from the UK as well.
Yeah, and then brought back in.
Yeah,
but they've
unfortunately.
Right, I see. Several hundred years ago, I think Jews have contributed quite well to this country.
How would you say so?
Well, I think there's sort of 30% of Nobel Prize winners.
It's going to be
They're
interesting.
pretty good in technology. Einstein, it's pretty good.
Okay.
So does that mean that?
So he corrected himself. So those of you can see, he said about 30% of Nobel Prize winners were Jewish, and he corrected himself, saying that is estimated about 22% of Nobel Prize winners were Jewish. So good to see that at least he's seemingly, whether he's doing this for just appearance, I don't know, but he's correcting himself. So at least people are, in theory, you're hoping that this is accurate. Obviously, you always have to then go and read behind it yourself, but at least then it seems to be that he's correcting himself.
Because some of these people have done some great achievements that all of their people can stay here.
Well, I think they've actually been responsible for an overwhelming amount of the number of the achievements.
I would argue that your achievements are irrelevant because our people come first. It doesn't matter, even if our people struggle and we're the worst people in the world, we are still a distinct group of people that deserves our own homeland. Jewish people have, despite the controversy around it, have their own homeland to return to. There is nowhere else for my people to go to. This is our final battleground. You guys have somewhere else to go. We do not.
Is that where you would send me, Israel?
Yeah.
What if Israel didn't?
Now, my question around this issue would be obviously the question then is around, you don't just have the ethnic component, which obviously you have the Jewish ethnic component, and Andrew has been open in his tweets, in his posts, for example, touting that he's Jewish, mate, he's 100% Jewish, what he says. So the Jewish component, but then my question to Steve in this instance would be, what if you had an English person that wanted to follow Judaism because it was the truth, and because they thought it was the truth, even, right? Because they thought it was. Would then, even though they could be 100% ethnically English, would they then be expelled also? That would just be a question I would like to ask, because a lot of the time you see this question around Jewish people. Okay, well, do you mean people that aren't ethnically Jewish but follow the religion? Do you mean, Jewish people who are ethnically Jewish but they might be, atheist in their beliefs or whatever? Because it can mean both a religion and an ethnicity, it can often then be difficult to understand which one anybody's talking about at a given time. Or are they talking about both? That would have just been my question to Steve at this moment in time. It's a question which I don't think Liam asked. At least I didn't hear him ask it anyway. I don't know whether Andrew's going to ask it later on. Be a case of, what if you had somebody who was ethnically English but wanted to follow Judaism because they thought it was the truth, they believed it was the truth? Right? What would then the response be to that person? I think that would be a really, really good question to ask in this instance.
Want me?
They would take you. You've got Jewish ethnicity.
What if I don't want to go to Israel?
That's not really your choice, unfortunately, buddy. If I'm in a position of power where I can control the immigration situation in the country, it's not a choice for you. Unfortunately, you may not like the outcome, but that's what I would do. Yes.
And look, I think this has to be a place where people can say what they want to say. I mean, that's the whole point of Heretics. It's the whole point of YouTube. It's the whole point of all of this. Conversations that are not being had on TV. So, fair play to you for saying it. I don't want to go.
So I've just paused it a minute. I just wanted to check the chat. But for any group to merge these, because the situation is different. 1,500 years ago, we were still migrating to different areas. Naturally, it is forced now. Yeah, that's the thing. The biggest thing is, groups are so different. And that's what Enoch Powell was. He was called a racist all the time, obviously. He's saying, no, you had this genuine diversity of all these different peoples that makes all of these different places around the world different. They have all these different colors, cultures, themes, whatever it is, and people, obviously, that make those cultures and themes. And it may always be a shame to lose that, right? To have this whole mass that have been, brought together, and now you go anywhere. If every country was to apply this, and then every culture is the same, because every people is just this completely, heterogeneous, if that's the right word, mess, if you will, that everything just basically becomes grey. There's no distinguishing culture for every place because there's no distinguishing people that made that culture. So yeah, people are using things that have been settled for like 1,500 years to try and make the case that what's happened in the last 100 years, not even 100 years, right, but the last 100 years, to make it that they're in any way similar. And it's not the case. The only thing you could say about them, really, in my opinion, is that it has been an invasion. Except with the Normans, they came here. Not only did they come here in such numbers that they weren't going to have a meaningful effect on the genealogy, from what I understand. You know, they think they came here, as I said, about 10,000 or 30,000, whatever it was. You have, I think it was in 1 year, you had a net influx of tenfold that in 1 year. That was in an entire conquest. The entire conquest brought, I think, about 30,000 people here. Now you have that in, like, what, a few months? Maybe not even that, a few weeks with legal plus illegal immigration. You have big numbers of that just coming through on every other, you know, string of boats. What did we have the other day? We had several hundred, I think, come over the other day. You have these massive boats that are bringing in hundreds, oftentimes every week or every couple of days, even when the weather's good. So yeah, to try and imply that the two are in any way the same, again, you're looking through both of the context of an invasion, right? Which again, you think that people would be opposed to invasion, but you have something that is just so massive on a scale that's never ever been seen before, that's been facilitated by a government. Like, say what you want, at least the king at the time fought for his country, fought for his people, right? Took them down to the battlefield to secure their existence, right? The king now and the queen, right, have been openly facilitating this. So again, you have so many things that are different that you can't directly compare the two. Not only do you have the fact as well that the groups are very similar to each other, you know, these northwestern European tribes or clans, whatever you want to call them, these northwestern European, you know, ethnic groups, yes, mixed a little bit and formed then this broader ethnic group, but that's been settled, as you mentioned, for like 1,500 years, you know, or in the case of the Normans, you know, 1,000 years. So what's happened in a tenth of that time is in any way comparable, right, is very, very disingenuous. Major effect of the Normans were upper class lords. Yeah, and, you know, we have a lot of terms of the language nowadays that were changed from the Old English by their terms and stuff like that. So yeah, there was no meaningful effect, as you mentioned, on the people that were here at the time, because they came here in little number, and they brought over large numbers of the upper class and stuff like that, which then went on to, you know, to rule and stuff like that. You know, it's just the two are not comparable, man. The two are really not comparable. I
don't speak Hebrew. I don't know that culture. I've been there a couple of times to visit over the years, as many not Jewish people have as well. But I never really considered myself anything other than English from a young age.
So if you had to choose between your Jewish ethnic group and the English ethnic group, who would you choose?
I don't believe in caring about ethnic groups. I would just choose England as a country. If we were talking about England versus Israel, I would choose England every time.
So what about if all of the Jews that was in the UK started defending Israel in the UK? Would you condemn them?
Yeah.
Your business is only using 20% of its data.
Just don't know whether Steve was expecting that answer to that question. We'll see how he responded. I've muted the ad for a minute, guys, because I can't skip it. Bloody HubSpot. Andrew, get better ads. Right.
So you're in a distinct group. That still doesn't change my opinion that I would remove you from the country. And it's not personal.
How would you measure this? Has this ever been measured? Well, obviously, if there's no evidence, that means that it's that it hasn't been measured. Now, the biggest thing is here that are being left out seemingly of these info boxes is that important to consider, and this is not me saying that this is the case, but absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. So just because there is no evidence that British Jews are more loyal to Israel than the UK, that does not actually mean that that is true. And I think it would be impossible, right, to get a real reflection of that. The only way you could really get a reflection of that is to be able to. There was a game that came out a little while ago called Remember Me, and you could go into past memories and you could actually see what was being like thought at the time and change memories and stuff like that, right? The only way you could really get a good answer to that question is be actually able to be an unperceived observer of people's thoughts on this matter. Because I don't think if you present them, it's a little bit like presenting a client, like I've done a couple of times before with MyFitnessPal, and tell them to log their calories or whatever. all manner of reasons to be, either dishonest, or what they will do is they will take this reading of their nutrition or whatever, and then instantly they'll change because of that. They'll have this perception of it, and instantly they'll change. So I don't know if you could ever measure that. It's a bit of a weird, murky issue that we've got here, because it's not like you can point to the demographic trends, like the graph, as people often show, the GIF, right, of the demographic change in cities and across the UK, right? I'd be like, that's happening, right? And you can literally see that with your own eyes. You can't see people's thoughts. You can't see what people are thinking at any given moment in time. But the thing is, you also have to juxtapose that with absence of evidence does not mean that is evidence of absence, okay? You need to have some kind of evidence to show that this is not true. No evidence does not actually mean that British Jews are more loyal to Israel than the UK, but how you would measure that, I honestly do not know. You could have reason to suspect it, though. You could have good reason to suspect it, given that Israel is the Jewish homeland. So it is something which you may suspect on this issue.
In my opinion, it's necessary. And no disrespect, but some of your people are very much responsible for the immigration that comes into our country.
Well,
if you look at the organisations, the institutions, the politicians who they're married to, the leaders of these NGOs, etc., they're all Jewish.
Yeah.
And that means that these people, I'm not saying all Jews do this, but there is a strong influence.
Well, this is an important one to talk about as well, because this is something that even Charlie Kirk was later coming around to say not long before he was killed. I think it's been one of the biggest things that's led to people speculating on who could be involved in that assassination. Again, a lot of those people I don't think have brought much compelling evidence forward. But again, here he even said, like, some of the biggest ones, Jewish donors, some of the biggest promoters of this quasi-Marxist, open borders, diversity stuff, right? And he was going on more so from an American perspective. But even he was highlighting this. He was a staunch supporter of Israel, at least if all of his public interactions, stuff like that, was to be believed. There's a lot of speculation on what was going on behind the scenes and stuff like that. He was expressing a lot of discontent with even a lot of the, big Jewish donors and stuff like that, who I don't think he named at any point, but they were calling him anti-Semitic of all things, right? For whatever reason, just because he wouldn't seemingly toe the exact line that they wanted. There is certainly, and figures like Zach Polanski don't help that out either, or David Poldansky, whatever name he's going by nowadays, right? Really, really do not help out this matter. And it's not just Jewish ones, because you have in many instances Christian ones as well. The Pope nowadays, head of the Catholic Church, saying that we should be able to live peacefully side by side with Islam. The same Pope 1,000 years ago was going to war with it. So it's not just Jewish ones. Important to note that many of the key principal figures indeed are, and it does set up this pattern, right, which is worthy of scrutiny. But again, you're seeing here the box coming in. Well, even Charlie Kirk, one of the most staunch supporters of Israel and defenders of Jews, to the extent even people who he identified as white identitarians, he would be vehemently opposed to and stuff like that, right? He called it out not long before he was killed, saying that some of the biggest non-profit donors, all of these things, were secular Jewish organizations. And then when eventually they brought all these people in, they started coming for Jewish people. They're like, oh, what the hell is going on? Be like, well, you created this. So it'd be like, he said there was decoupling to do. There was, divesting to do, all of this stuff. He was very strong in his terms. So there's important to consider, really, if nothing else. Very, very important to consider. Those damn info boxes. I can see why people started to see that they were very annoying. Again, it seems as though it was a novel approach. Now, somebody who he vehemently disagreed with, whom I saw the interview with, was Helen Weberly. I don't know if he'd done anything like that with regards to that interview and stuff like that. I have no idea. But the biggest thing is that Steve, right, maybe your question takes him off guard or whatever. Steve doesn't have the luxury of putting these info boxes in. So I can see why people are, a bit, angry in this regard. But yeah, I can also see from a creator standpoint why Andrew has done it as well. And I've done it to a little point as well, where conversations I've had in the past, if I want to put some footage over the top of it, like I was talking with Tim Davis earlier on, for one of the first conversations I'd done on the podcast, and the topic of the California wildfires came up, so I put the video overlay over the top of it. I can see why people do it, but again, this completely novel makes you think, did he do this just with Steve in mind? Why wasn't he doing this before? Another valid question to ask.
In immigration to the UK, with connections to the Jewish organisations and Jewish lobbies, and to me, that's very problematic, because our people are being demographically replaced, and your people are helping that happen.
There are a lot of Jews doing that, and this is a cause of frustration among many Jews who are silenced. I mean, who aren't able to put forward the other side so much, and the reason for that is mostly TV channels and the like will not even let us speak. I can't go on. As much as you're much more controversial than I am, I'm still so controversial that I can't even get my view on our TV channels. I think this reminds me of, I had a sort of debate with a human rights lawyer recently who was the ultra kind of woke, let's bring in lots of immigration, those kinds of, that was the kind of thing. And he had some Jewish ancestry in him, but mostly was white English, right? And most people in the tweets below and all the comments were saying, see that guy, Clive Stafford Smith, he's a Jew, that's why. And the irony to me was, here are two people talking, but one of them is fully Jewish. I'm as Jewish as it gets, Ashkenazi, all of those things. Arguing vehemently against immigration with someone who has some Jewish blood in him, who is arguing for immigration. But the only blood in the room at that point arguing for immigration and more immigration was white English blood. So it's definitely something that I think you guys sometimes miss. There's a huge number of woke people in this country who are white English. You've noticed those people.
Yeah, and those people are a problem, but they are still our people, whether we like it or not. I don't agree with their ideology. I don't agree with what they want for this country, but they're still my people. They still have a right to this land.
Well, so do Jews. They've been here since 1066.
Yeah, but they also do not. This is not your land.
But
this is not your country.
Mean? Whose land was it? It wasn't the Normans' land before they.
This is the English land. This is built by England.
And what does England mean? England comprises Jewish as well.
England is the land of the Angles. It's named after us.
Well, tell the Normans that.
The Normans didn't really have much input in terms of our DNA.
They definitely changed and shaped our culture.
They shaped our culture and influenced our organisations and institutions, but they very much did not interfere in our ethnic group.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest thing there. You notice an info. Oh, sorry, ladies and gentlemen. Let me know. Am I coming through okay? I think I accidentally hit something. Right, because I got my cable resting right by here. Notice there's no info box coming up here to talk about the Norman stuff and all of these kinds of things. Yeah, Jewish as it gets, not English then. Yeah, and that's the biggest thing. It'd be like, one of these things, like people who then say that, people can be proud of their ancestry and proud of where they're from and their heritage and stuff like that. Yeah, sure. But the biggest thing is then it would not be English. That's also what they have to acknowledge, which again is where the problem comes in. Because again, it kind of feeds into Steve's argument there. But notice there's no info box coming up here about how many Normans landed and how much effect that would have had on the genealogy. And the biggest thing is, yes, you take, like, they influence the culture maybe because, as you said, Varg, they're coming in, they were from the upper class, the lords, the knights, would have had influence on the social customs and the governance and all of those things, right? And the difference being, however, is that if you could take a blood kit back and you could take back all your futuristic equipment and stuff like that and do a blood test on them, then it would point to a certain area of the world that likely, at the very least, wouldn't be England, right? I think that's pretty much where it would point to. It would point to France, right? It would point to that area of the world. Because again, these things have been, stable over long periods of time. It would still point, no matter, say they kept in their little social enclave, only Normans breeding with Normans, for example, then even 1,000 years later, that would still point back to France, would it not? Am I right in saying that? I think that's pretty self-explanatory, or at least pretty easy to understand. You don't need to overcomplicate it. And that's where I said this before, is that the one thing you'd never be able to fake right? At least in the context of actually doing the test properly. You wouldn't be able to fake your blood. Now, athletes pass piss tests all the time despite being on drugs, oftentimes because they swap somebody's urine with somebody else. I think that was the whole thing around the Russian Winter Olympics scandal, right? They were basically swapping piss samples with clean samples and stuff like that, right? You can get around these things, but that, again, further makes the point, because that's not your piss in the cup. That's not your blood in the test tube. Your blood, right? Blood from my body would point to somewhere in the world, right? The blood from somebody else would point to somewhere in the world. You can't fake that. That's the biggest thing, is that regardless of culture, regardless of what language you speak, even regardless of what your passport says, you can't fake that. It's bad faith, just like him sat there Googling everything before he asked me. Yeah, I can understand that. I don't think, and I think that you can see the different kind of thing where going into this, it was a different kind of conversation. Again, kind of, I don't know whether it's maybe some of Andrew's, again, BBC credentials showing through, maybe. I don't know. But yeah, I can understand that. Because maybe Steve wouldn't have known that was going to be the case. It looks like the bit of the video that Andrew filmed beforehand talking about the info boxes was filmed afterwards, right? Now, I've done that, not for interviews. I've never done anything like these info boxes during interviews and stuff like that. I've recorded bits after the fact for certain episodes where I've gone back and I've had a chance to look up certain things or whatever, and I put those in my own things. But yeah, when you're doing things like this to try and make the guest look bad, again, you can see there, because of how opposed in ideas, and Andrew are saying that he believes Steve's ideas are dangerous, almost like anything which you can do to try and discredit them is fair game, which I can understand why Steve would think that. Absolutely.
In terms of our ethnicity.
How's that possible? What does that mean?
Especially, sorry, just wanted to, I think I said it, but especially if he wasn't informed that they were going to do that beforehand, which it does seem that he wasn't.
They're very much the elite, they're very much the elites that came over when there was the Normans,
right,
and so forth. But going back to your point, England belongs to the English. It doesn't matter whether you do not like that outcome. This is why, for instance, you would be in the civic nationalist position, because you've got skin in the game. Because if you lent into the ethno-state sort of approach, like your homeland does, like if, for instance, Israel's allowed an ethno-state, sure, it's around 78%, but they're expanding and they're making more living room for Jewish people, and the only people that really have any right in that country are Jewish people.
There have been people that have speculated over this, so I believe this is accurate from what I understand, that indeed Arabs, who make up 21%, hold Israeli citizenship with full voting rights, and some of them do serve in the Israeli Knesset. I've seen some people theorizing, however, and certainly I think many of the Israeli nationalists, right, would prefer that this wasn't the case. I'm speculating there. I haven't seen any of them that I understand really comment on this. Maybe that's them. Again, you see them when they spoke to Tommy Robinson, they spoke about the British. Like, the one guy doesn't have a very good perception of the British, said that they have a special place in hell. Maybe they have greater affinity with, again, you know, they could say that they're distinct ethnicities, but very similar from certain regions of the world, you know, and including them into their culture, because they are very genetically similar. Couldn't you make, again, the same argument for Israel that you're making for the UK? But then if you make that argument towards Israel and say that, oh, well, maybe it shouldn't just be a state for the Jews, and they shouldn't be a majority ethno state, or all of a sudden that makes you an anti-Semite or whatever. But if you say it about the English and that they shouldn't be able to be the vast majority in their home, all of a sudden that makes you a far right Nazi. A bit of incongruence there. But yeah, as far as I'm aware, that at least they do indeed have Arabs who serve as politicians in the Israeli Knesset. One thing you can say about Israel, even acknowledging our checkered history and even understanding, you know, the whole thing about the Jewish organizations, the secular Jewish organizations, especially that promote this Marxist open border stuff, the right-wing Jewish factions in Israel that are constantly hearkening for war, and then the left-wing Jews that encourage multiculturalism and all of this stuff. That's the way it seems to be anyway. It's the one that you can say that at least it's the one state in the Middle East that is, resembling a, Western democracy, if you will. So at least it's kind of like, if you could say it's the most advanced in that regard. But again, when we're looking at things like wars in the Middle East and the British involvement in those wars and stuff like that, and especially Americans' involvement in those wars, you could certainly question that, because it's just questioning foreign influence and foreign involvement in foreign wars and whether it's to our benefit. So you think no war, at least foreign war anyway, at this moment in time, is something that we should be involved in, because the problems are here. It's the biggest thing is you're seeing here when these conversations come up, and I like to have conversations around this because, the foreign conflicts are inevitably going to be coming into the discussion, obviously, but a lot of times people will want to talk about that kind of stuff, what foreign wars, Israel, Ukraine, all of this stuff, because they want to get away from stuff that's happening at home, often because they don't want to face the grim realities of what's going on at home. But that's where we are, and it's the only one that we have. Hey, David, how you doing? Yeah, going through Andrew's question. So not Andrew's question, Andrew Gold's podcast with Steve. Andrew Gold's a bit disingenuous. He's a phony. Starting to get that vibe, especially when he brought in these info boxes and stuff like that. And it does seem that he's obviously coming at this with a particular angle. It was a bit disappointing to see, but looking forward to seeing what Steve's responses would be. The one thing I would say that gets me about Andrew versus somebody like a Liam Tufts. I think I said this before. Liam Tufts speaks in very kind of just regular person terms, just regular people's terms, which can be good for trying to make things, simple and trying to keep them like without needless complication. Andrew then being more kind of like the intellectual, kind of be maybe you might say a little bit more professional, a little bit more prim and proper, whatever words you want to use, right, especially with his BBC background and stuff like that. It can present a slightly different attacks for Steve to deal with, which I think is good nonetheless. But I can see what people would say that, and especially when these info boxes, which seem to be a novel thing coming up specifically for the Steve Laws thing, it seems as though again it's very reminiscent of like MSNBC posh, that's the word, MSNBC fact checking kind of thing, but again very selective in the way that it's been done. He left out the one with the Normans, which would have gone against his point, and it seems to be the ones that he is putting that seem to contradict him, but not so much contradict him, but again trying to make it seem as though it's been done in an unbiased way, but there seems to be a little bit more of a systematic approach that's gone on behind it. But not to mention it's done after the fact, which Steve had no input on it, and if he wasn't informed of that beforehand, I think that's very, very disingenuous indeed.
What do you mean any rights?
A non-Jew could not lead that country. Why can Israel have an ethno-state but the English can't? We only have one land. This is our land.
They could change that law. There's no law at this moment in time, but they could change it. At the end of the day, they have the majority of the population and they have the majority of politicians in the Knesset. There's no reason they couldn't change it. So again, just because they have no law dictating that this prime minister must be Jewish at this point, do you really think Jewish people, again, people having discontent that the English or the British are being led by foreigners, you could understand then if Jewish people would have discontent of being led by a foreigner as well. You could perfectly understand that.
It doesn't matter where you come from, it doesn't matter how long you've been here, it doesn't matter if you was born here, your grandparents were born here, it means nothing to me. Total remigration, everyone has to go.
I think Israel, we need to remember it's actually several ethnicities really. I mean, when you go there, probably at least half of the people there are not white, so they're not Ashkenazi Jews, they're not the same ethnicity as me. We're talking about Ethiopian Jews, Mizrahi, Sephardi Jews.
It's a Jewish state. It's a Jewish state.
It's a Jewish state.
Yeah, it's not it's not an ethnic state on terms of separate Jewish ethnicities. It's a state for the Jews.
It's about a culture though, really, with Jews.
Yes,
if you converted to Judaism, you could go as well. It's not an easy thing to do.
If I converted to Judaism tomorrow, it would not take me in. Not that I would do it.
They might not take you in.
No. So this is my point. It's all in favour of the Jews. Everything in that country is in favour of the Jews. This is, and there's nothing wrong with that. You want a country that's in favour of your own people. Fine. Crack on. My problem is that it affects my country. What goes on in Israel affects my country. Why does that happen? Why should that happen? Why are my politicians in the pocket of Jewish lobby groups? Why?
Now maybe you could say then you have to bring in other things as well, like UN, all of these other groups as well, which are more, as Andrew's mentioned, it feels like the globalist organizations. You can even group in things like as I mentioned before, the Catholic Church with their big drives to, for accepting the asylum seeker and all of these things, right? Despite the fact we've seen that the asylum system is just another measure for immigration, right? Which, people should have the right, being the inhabitants of those lands or being the indigenous people of those lands to have the determination over that, right? It's a little bit like your house. It's an extension of your house. You decide who comes into your house and who goes and who has permission to be there and who doesn't, right? Who is it for any government or any other authority to say who is allowed to be in that home, right? Cuts straight against the thing of private property, right? But you've seen that you have to then, I suppose, talk about all of these other things as well. But for sure, think about it. These wars in the Middle East, they create refugees, they create all of these displaced civilians and stuff like that. And where the hell do they end up going? To our places. So, yeah. And our government, because they want to displace us and because they want to replace us for their own political gain, are more than happy to take them in. So we always have to juxtapose that again with our own governments as well. But yeah, absolutely. It's a case of, there's this war that's going on 100 or 1,000 miles away, whatever it is. And then we are having to be affected by it. Why? Well, we don't have the mandate over that land anymore. Hell, they initiated many attacks to us over it, right? Both the Arabs and the Jews. You had the Sergeant's Affair. You had the King David Hotel bombing. You had all of these other things, right? That many of them still say that we have a special place in hell for. So, he does indeed have a point here. I think the chief thing at this point, though, regardless of what's going on in Israel, the chief villain is always our own government. But yeah, you can understand why somebody would be aggrieved when they see that these wars in the Middle East and stuff like that in Israel, and we're going to be talking about collective punishment in a little bit as well, which I think is going to be an interesting part of the discussion, that you have this war going on and then all of a sudden you're having to be affected by it. Just the regular people, not the politicians. Why? It's a valid question for sure. Hey, Autumn, how's it going? Emma Solomon, head of the UK Refugee Council. Is he who we think he is? Is he who we think he is? Name would imply.
Why are all of these NGOs flooding immigrants into my country? Why are we allowing this to happen?
I think if you look for a pattern, you're going to see it, unfortunately. And if you see
but patterns
Jews
exist for a reason.
Patterns exist for a reason. Well, yeah, because humans are scared. Humans are scared.
However,
so they look for patterns.
The biggest thing is about then stereotypes exist for a reason, and say a lot of times, say we want, stereotypes don't necessarily exist without the pattern, right? Regardless of if it's a good stereotype or a bad stereotype, right? Doesn't really matter. There's a pattern of either behavior or observation, whatever, that underlies that stereotype, and that behavior or that pattern exists. It's just the way it is.
To find a way to fight against something. Your country and my country has been recently completely changed demographically, and it's a really scary thing. So we look for who can we blame? Who can we blame this on? Look, I'm Jewish, all my family's Jewish, everyone I know is Jewish. I can tell you none of them are pro-immigration, particularly Islamic immigration, which is the majority of what we're talking about. But you're seeing a pattern in certain NGOs. I see it on Twitter all the time. Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates and Keir Starmer.
Now, I'm a person that obviously cares about Islam. Obviously, they probably want to put a sword, and cut my head off, right? But it does reek to me a little bit of deflection there, having to group it in with Islamic immigration, because obviously you can't necessarily group it in with foreign immigration because, well, I suppose you could say he's not really in a position where he could do that.
All these people are Jewish, and Tony Blair and David Cameron, and then none of them are Jewish.
No, but their advisors were.
Yes,
the Home Secretary, like for instance, the Blair era, who flooded into the country. On their cabinet, like 5 of them were Jews.
Well, that's because Jews are overachievers.
No, they're overrepresented.
They're overrepresented in Nobel Prizes as well, as I said.
And they also have the victim cards.
There we go. So, is this actually true? Point being is there, for the viewer, is it actually true? Were indeed 5 Jews in Blair's cabinet? Or were there 5 Jews? This is the question that the info box is posing. Steve says that there were 5 Jews in Blair's cabinet. The info box is saying that it is not. There is not. Is it true or is it not? That's the problem we're asking here, because we have Steve's testimony. We have the info box. So I suppose unless you have the exact breakdown of Blair's cabinet, right, you wouldn't know. because you need to be able to go and look at those people, and a lot of them, you know, if they were to put down on a census, you don't know if that's 100% accurate, I suppose. There's a lot of things here, especially when you're dealing with around that time. Did Blair make his cabinet members sign a form stating what their ethnicity or religious affiliation was? I don't know. I don't think he really would have cared all that much, just because he wanted to flood it with all different kinds of people anyway. Didn't care seemingly whether they were Muslim. Obviously did care whether they were Muslim, and whether they were Sikh, whether they're Hindi, and whatever else. Just focused on rubbing the right nose in diversity, so to speak. But yeah, you can see there's some prominent members pulled out. Gordon Brown, Jack Straw. We actually talked about Jack Straw and some of his remarks in the David Starkey stream. David Blanket. So again, he's pulled out a couple of names to be like, oh, well, look at all these examples seemingly who aren't. But again, for the info box to really be accurate, I suppose, could you put down like a full breakdown of Blair's cabinet? But again, put in after the fact. Does seem as though Andrew saw this, realized maybe he didn't have an answer for it, and then wanted to go put it in after the fact.
But this should be a good thing to be overrepresented, because you've
no, it's not. Why should a foreign?
But it wasn't DEI policies, was it, back then?
But why should a foreign ethnic group be overrepresented in my own
Because it's not
homeland?
a foreign ethnic group. They've been here for over 1,000 years.
No, you are a foreign ethnic group. You're not English.
Over 1,000 years.
You're not English.
Been here over 1,000. I am English.
I don't care if you've been here 2,000 years. It's not your land. England belongs to the...
Didn't he just say earlier on in the conversation that he was 100% Jewish? Which, if Jewish is an ethnicity, therefore would not be English, would it not? And that's not me expressing any hatred or anything like that, but it's just said he was 100% Jewish. And if we're going to take Jewish as an ethnicity, not just merely a religious affiliation, then that would mean that you can't be the other thing. You can't be English in this instance. Notice there was no info box for that.
English.
Have you done on my heritage test, or one of those tests?
Yes.
Right, and what, 100% English?
98%.
What's the other 2%?
Irish.
All right. Well, there you go.
There you go. English.
Well, partly Irish.
What, with 2%?
Is Harry Kane English?
He's Irish.
He's Irish.
Yes, because he's got Irish ancestry.
This kind of obsession, look, I get where it comes from.
No, but this is where it comes from, because you're going down the route of what about this 2%? That's not an argument that I even present. This is not an argument that I come through and use on my campaigns. My campaign is England belongs to the English. If your grandparents are English and their grandparents are English, you're English.
Well, then fine, I'm English.
You're not
good.
English, though. You're not an English. You're not.
My grandparents were English.
You're not English.
Well, they're all born in England.
Doesn't matter. Being born in England. If I was born in a barn, would I be a fucking horse? Do you know what I mean? It's ridiculous. Like, using that argument is nonsense.
I think to define someone's nationality, you can probably look at where.
But the other thing is, he can't say then he's 100% Jewish. Because obviously he's not referring, if I'm not mistaken, Andrews said that he's, at least on past interviews or past podcasts, whatever, that he's more atheistic, if anything. So it's not coming from a religious standpoint. So if he's saying he's 100% Jewish, what point could you possibly be saying that from other than your ancestry and therefore your ethnicity? And again, so can you be these two separate things at the same time? This is like, I'm having to engage this weird kind of doublethink to make this work. Again, you can't just, because earlier on in this conversation, he threw out that he was 100%, Jewish. I think the exact phrase he used was, he's as Ashkenazi as it gets. So be like, well, how do you bring these two together? I suppose the only way you could do it then is by saying that, well, there's no such thing really as English. And, well, where does that road lead you down? That leads you down the same road that Ricky Doolan was going down with regards to, the Laura Towler debate that we covered a little while ago.
They and their ancestors are from, and if mine are from England, then I think I've got a good argument for saying that I am English. Now, you would say ethnically English, and I would say, okay, well, what is that? Again, we're going back to that, and I don't think you have an answer to that, unfortunately. Anglo-Saxon, Norman, Celtic, and back from 1066, Jews.
So this is a thing, right? from your perspective, all you care about is the Jewish argument. All your interest is, your interest isn't what's best for this country. Your interest is, I want to stay in this country. It's for me. I want to stay here. My family were born here.
But why do you say that's my own? That's all we've spoken about so far. Why do you say that all of my interest is Jewishness? We can move on to another topic if you want to.
No, carry on. By all means.
We went Jewish because you said I shouldn't be here anymore.
No, I don't believe you should be. Yeah.
Well, I understand that, and I respect the opinion, and I think we should have this conversation.
And it's not personal. It's just necessary. My people are being demographically replaced in my homeland. A lot of your people are responsible for that.
But more of your people are.
Yeah, our people have played a part as well.
Vastly more of your people are responsible.
Yes, but having foreign subversives help those
we're not
things.
foreign. We've been here since 1066.
You are foreign. To me, you're foreign. To me, you're foreign. You disagree.
Well, to me, you're 2% Irish.
I'm an Englishman.
Yes.
I'm looking at you as a Jew, and I'm telling you, you are foreign.
Well, you wouldn't have known that if I didn't tell you.
No, your name's Gold.
Yeah, well, if we change the name.
From Goldstein.
Yeah, we could change it to another name.
Yeah, so that's what? You're subverting yourself even more to try and hide amongst the population. It's just proving my point. You people...
Oh, I saw this clip. I was waiting for this to come up. I saw this clip. This is like, oh. I think one thing you can say, maybe I'm playing devil's advocate here, in Andrew's favour here, because I think maybe judging by his facial expression here, he might have realised what he just done played straight into Steve's hands, or even then just... again, it's the thing, revealing that he changed his name, or at least his family changed his name. I don't know whether he changed his name specifically or whether it was his family that changed his name, but I saw people pointing this out, that he changed his family name. His name is not Andrew Gold, it's Andrew Goldstein. And then again, highlighting there that that's a form that could be seen as a form of subversion. And it kind of plays into the whole thing of the stereotyping. Well, it's like, oh, hang on. If the stereotype exists, well, there's going to be something that underlies a stereotype, because most people, just being regularly logical people, I don't think that they just make conceptions of people for no reason whatsoever, right? For the most part, if there's a stereotype, there's going to be something, at least in that person's worldview, in how they see the world, that underlies that stereotype. But if that stereotype exists, that means that a lot of people have noticed it. And that doesn't always mean that those people are right. But again, most people are able to see things with their eyes and hear things with their ears. I think Andrew realizes what he's kind of done here, and he realizes he's kind of undone his entire thing. And respect to him for not cutting this out. Other people, if they'd had this in the interview or whatever, they would have cut it out or whatever. But it's like, respect in a way for like not cutting this out, and seeing there this like, oh, holy shit, I just kind of played into his hands here, and I just kind of undone almost like my entire argument. This was nuts.
If you enjoyed that clip, then make sure to go on over to the Voice of the Valleys X page at VOT_Valleys on X. We're also on Instagram at Voice of the Valleys. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, comment, all of that good stuff. Thank you so much, and we'll see you again soon. Godspeed.